So as I say, from the perspective of just talking to you a little bit about the Construction Industry Register Ireland, it's a new register established and launched on the 1st of March this year with the intention as a voluntary registration scheme to improve the standards of, we say, the delivery of the product. Part of that process is going to involve the delivery of CPD. Now, I'm just going to give you a bit of a background to CIRI, because I'm not sure if everybody knows what it is and how it works. In simple terms, we were approached by the Department of the Environment back in 2012 and asked to look at a model around how we would establish a national register with the Department of the Environment as a partner. So we made our submission, and basically it was to improve certification, registration of builders, the standard of building itself, the quality of the build, and to obviously, I suppose, enhance the whole brand of construction in this country again, because it has had a bit of a serious kicking over the last 6 to 7 years. At this moment in time, the register is a voluntary register, so you don't have to be on it. But we've noticed in the last couple of months that when planning applications are going out, they're actually starting to ask for your CIRI CPD or your CIRI number. And we've had a lot of queries from people who aren't registered yet, wondering how they get through the process. From the point of view of 2015, at some stage in 2015, the register will become statutory. Now, to be fair, I asked one of the guys from the Department of the Environment at a meeting last week, when does he see the register going statutory? And he said to me, well, to give you a kind of an indication of where we're at, on October, by the end of October, we'll have the heads of bill drafted. So we're that far away from actually legislation becoming enacted. So I think it'll be very late 2015, early 2016 before we actually see a statutory register being finalised. I suppose in real terms, the register is formed into 4 different components. It's established in partnership with the CIF. The CIF are funding and are staffing the register as it stands at the moment. It does have a registration board, and that board literally, I suppose the key function of that board is to look at the registration process and make sure companies are meeting the verified standards before they register and go on the website. There is a complaints and appeals committee structure there as well that will support anybody who has an issue with the registration process, or if they've been removed from the register at some point in time for non-compliance. And then, as I say, the operation around the CIRI office, which is staffed, as I say, by our staff. We have an executive full-time and 2 full-time administrators currently working on dealing with registration queries, establishing the verification process, and then getting people through the board and onto the website. Later last week, we were discussing the whole CPD process, and it's at a committee stage at the moment. It's getting towards finalisation. By the 11th of December this year, we should have a finalised policy around CPD. We should have a CPD structure. We should have CPD plans, and we should also have an offering of kind of structured half-day tuition around how to develop your own CPD plan so that you get the benefit from the process. I think the good news message around the CPD process is that it's for everybody. It's not just about the managing director who happens to be an engineer or a chartered surveyor or an architect who gets his CPD and has it. It's talking about all levels within the business. So you're talking about your general operatives, your supervision on site, your craft workers, your site management, and then your senior team. So the whole idea is to start training the industry, upskilling the industry from the bottom up and the top down. And the idea behind the CPD process will be that to kind of initially after December this year to start launching regional briefings around how you complete a CPD plan. Now, a lot of companies in the room may already have a process for doing that, but the target audience we're looking at, it's probably companies with 20 or less. That's kind of a lot of the guys that are registered with CIRI as it stands, small house builders, small construction companies. Those guys and those companies tend not to know much about CPD and how to deal with it. So the idea will be to get them into a room together and show them how simple it is to develop a CPD plan. So from the point of view of the register itself, the background to the register is that it's to establish a couple of things. One, there's a code of ethics. Now, when I launched the first induction in CIF back in March, I had 80 builders in a room, and to a man, when I said code of ethics, they broke down laughing and said to me, really? And I said, no, genuinely, there is a code of ethics. And when we went through the code of ethics and explained what it was about, there was less laughter and a bit more kind of serious take as to what was going on. We were talking about formalising the relationship between the builder and the client and the designer, and putting a professional face on the industry so that, you know, what we say is what we do, what we promise is what we deliver. And I think that's very important going forward, and that's what the Code of Ethics element is going to be about. I think, you know, looking at the initial voluntary basis of the scheme, that's basically just to see what the level of interest is, what the level of engagement is going to be like, where the possible bottlenecks are. As one guy described it to me, it's like a soft opening. You know, you get a feel for what the industry is going to react, what it needs, what the queries are around even registration, because one of the big issues that we had when we launched was that the whole registration process is an online process. Now, as much as there's a vast community out there that are very computer literate, you'd be surprised how many people aren't and had difficulties even going through the basic registration process. So I think from that point of view, we were asking for very basic fundamental information. We were asking for tax clearance certificates to abide and read and understand and sign that code of ethics, and then to adhere to the obligations within the actual policy document that was issued. Now, the website, we do have a CIRI website, you can see it there, www.ciri.ie. That has a lot more information, and within a half an hour today I couldn't give you even a small piece of what is going on there at the moment. There's quite a lot happening. But I think the important aspects for registered people and registered business is that they must, once they've become registered, once they've become visible on the website, is that they have to abide by the Code of Ethics and the commitments within that. To obviously demonstrate their competence and experience, and to follow through on the basic principles. If you don't know, get help. And I think that has been always a situation where if we didn't know, we pushed on through until we got to where we were going. So I think on that basis, that is a significant change. Obviously, one of the big parts of the CPD process into 2014 or 2015 and 16 will be that we're pushing hard on the level of training around building regulations, building control regulation, understanding what the legislation is asking us to do. So to that end, one of the principles is that there are 4 pillars that you can get your CPD on. Pillar 1 is building control, building regulations, and we're seeking within the first 18 months of the launch of the register that at least 70% of the training is done in that space. Now that's done on the basis that we recognise there is a serious gap in knowledge on the ground in the interpretation of the legislation and how it's to be rolled out and implemented. So that's one of the key things that we will be looking for. Now, we're not saying to somebody that if they come in at 50% and say, well, I got 50% of my points in this space and I've done quite well, that we're going to say, well, you've actually failed to achieve it. But we're driving for that 75% of total to make sure that all tiers within the business are actually getting some level of change in knowledge, some level of change in approach to delivery of the final product. As I say, one of the big challenges, and again, from a training unit within the Construction Industry Federation, we do a lot of business with members and non-members and national bodies, but there is a challenge out there where you have small cash flow, you're looking at balance in the books, and then someone comes along and says to you, you must go and do X number of hours training. So one of the challenges we face as an industry body, along with the other professional bodies out there, is to offer CPD at a rate where people can afford it, where it's targeted and delivering the key messages, that there's a benefit to the end user when they walk away, they've learned something. And I suppose to that end of it, the CPD and the professional training side of it is going to be key, how we go out there and offer. And this is where QualiBuild, from my perspective as a partner and a stakeholder, it really does, you know, meet the needs of the industry going forward. The whole idea of the greening of the industry, the awareness campaign that's there. One of the other elements that we've also asked in the initial process is that you declare any convictions under health and safety legislation or the building control legislation in the last 5 years. That's a declaration if you've had a prosecution or conviction, that you declare that so that people are aware of where we stand. So the process itself is online. You're more than welcome to look at it. There's a link at the very back of the slide pack here that I have today. But I suppose what I really want to talk about is the kind of the criteria for registration, and a little bit then about CPD at the end. Companies must be able to demonstrate that they have experience of minimum 3 years. Now that's a challenge at the moment for some companies. Some companies are only starting off, so there has to be flexibility around that. Demonstrating that they understand the legislative and regulatory processes as they stand at the moment. Now, that's another one that's very hard to actually verify with people when you're talking to them and say, you know, I remember, was it 2012 or 2013, I'm not sure which, Part L came out, and we did a briefing, and there was 80 people in the room, and I met grown men coming out of the room who were pale in the face saying to me that I think it's time to leave the construction sector. Part L is not for me. And what was wrong really was that the guy who stood up to deliver Part L frightened the living daylights out of them because he was very technical, very knowledgeable, a brilliant delivery. But to the audience that he was pitching at, it was at the wrong level. So we got those groups back in again, and we did a different delivery, and a lot of them are still in the business, thankfully, today. So I think, again, what QualiBuild will try and achieve and aims to achieve via the trainer and then via the delivery to the end user will be a very concise, very practical approach to the delivery of the message. The key message being that you should be able to walk away, if you're a trainer or if you're providing training, that the candidates walk away with a learning outcome that's actually usable. Not that it's highly technical, not that it's highly legislative. I know for a fact that if you put guys in a room, and I think Seamus said it this morning, put a load of guys in a room and start talking about building legislation and watch them glaze over. And that's even, you know, the professionals in the industry. It's heavy going. We have to have a model that works to break that kind of process down a bit. So there's a couple of bits there around the compliance side, around the tax clearance certificate, the normal stuff that you'd expect to see, the Safe Pass, the CSCS cards that are required, all part of the registration process. There is a benefit to the company as well, and it's something to kind of highlight. Once registered, their company details, their area of operation geographically, and the services they offer are also up on a front-facing part of the website. So the public can go in and say, I'm looking for a guy in Offaly who is a plasterer. If you're a plasterer and you're in Offaly and you're registered, you're up there on that list. So there's a search engine there for the public as well. So from that point of view, it's a benefit to those that are registered. And they're seeing that as a major plus at the moment, because obviously everybody's out there looking for a bit of work. So if you're pre-registered, people say, well, that guy's vetted, he's been through a process. We feel a little bit more comfortable. Against the normal rule of thumb, which used to be, my neighbour got a guy to do a bit of plastering, he was quite good, we'll use him. That's the old criteria of the way things have been done. Just to touch on the code of ethics, as I say, the first time I spoke about this, there was kind of boisterous laughter in the room, and kind of I think at the time they probably thought I'd lost it or I'd gone the wrong slide presentation. But it talks about, you know, the general principles, the basic principles of doing business in construction, the construction practice, the legal and regulatory side of the business, and then your integrity and discipline. You know, over the years, it has been a very serious challenge within the industry to kind of say that we have integrity around what we do when you see some of the really bad elements of what's happened out there. And be they members of the CIF, be they non-members of the CIF, the sad part of it is that the brand is damaged once it's damaged. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you are. If construction gets a bad name, it gets a bad name for everybody in the business. So I think there's a major plus in having a national register, where there's a vetting process, where there's an element of people going through a motion to get to somewhere. And the other thing about it is, as well, is that I suppose it's not a fee-based thing. We're not really interested in the fees. For our own members get it as part of their membership for free. Non-members pay a fee to the registry to process their application. It's really about getting the standard up from where we have it and improving the training, improving the general perception of the industry, okay? Now, there's a couple of other bits and pieces there within the presentation pack that I'm not really going to get into. What I want to just move on a little bit today is just to talk to you about the whole CPD process, because really that's my brief here today. I went into a little bit of advertising mode for CIRI, and then I said to myself, I better pull back. And I asked Liz yesterday, could I change my slides? And she said, no, you can't, we've done the memory sticks. So what I'm going to do for the next couple of minutes before I wrap up my session is just go through really what we're going to talk about, the CPD process, and where QualiBuild and other entities out there, such as Engineers Ireland, such as the DITs of this world, and the other ITs around the country, not forgetting Blanchardstown, because Mark will get very upset. But the reality is that there's a vast array of really good, intuitive programs out there that will help people in the industry at all levels. QualiBuild is part of that process now. As far as I'm concerned, as the person looking after the CPD process for CIRI, it's up there with Engineers Ireland and the rest of them as pre-approved. This will have a FETAC or QQI registered rating at level 6. And that has weighting in European standards, on the European framework, as much as it does have a rating here within Ireland. There's challenges to getting people on the course, there's challenges to engagement. But success is there already. We have 50 people going through the train the trainer. We're looking for another 50. So I kind of emphasise the message from those that have spoken before me today, to go out there and engage with those in the industry that who need this process, who need to go and do the train the trainer. Within our own organisation, we've just got a new manpower committee established that deals with manpower education and training. There's 26 different companies, key decision makers in HR and training sitting on that committee, and they've been briefed on that this week. Now, as I said, if every one of those gives us one person, we're halfway there to the next 50. There's people in the room today, I'm sure, that would need to engage on the train the trainer side of things as well and see a benefit. There's a huge cost benefit to training your own people internally to the business and getting that message right. So I think, from my own point of view, just to pitch that out there to you, that we really do need to push for that next 50 and try and get the right people involved and engaged, because the programme is going to drive on, it is going to be very successful. But I think there will be a point in time that we will be turning people away, saying maybe the next time round you can reapply, but now we're full. So I think that's an important message to get out there today. I think CPD, for my own point of view as a professional in the industry, I've been doing it for years. I'm sure a lot of you in the room have been doing your CPD for years. It's about improving your own knowledge. It's about learning outcomes for yourself, to learn how to do your job better, to get value out of what you're doing, to add value to what you're producing or to your clients' needs. CPD in construction, to the general operative on the ground, to the craft worker on the ground, it's the same. They've had Safe Pass for years, they've had CSCS cards for years for driving plant and machinery. But what we haven't been doing is saying to them about, you're applying a radon barrier, but you've just dropped a load of steel on top of it. Why did you do that? They don't know better because they haven't been told. It's not neglect. These are bright guys. I mean, just because a guy leaves school without a piece of paper in his hand doesn't mean that he's not a clever guy. There's guys that I've taught who have reading and writing difficulties, who can remember a 5-day programme because they've sat in the room and they've absorbed it because they've had to. They can't write. And when they do an exam orally, they do as well as any other candidate in the room. So we have very bright people at all levels within the industry, and they need to be engaged with and they need to be brought along, because they are the people who will affect change from what we're doing from a design point of view, from a project management point of view. We can be excellent, and I'm sure most of us are excellent at what we do. But if the guy that's getting the instruction on the ground is not told how to do it right, that's where we fail. And that's where the product becomes tainted and the brand becomes damaged. So I think that's part of the big change that we're pushing for and trying to do that. Over the last couple of years, the industry has been engaged, and so has the CIF, with the department and with various ministers from various different governments, looking for the regulations and changes. And sometimes we fight with the government, sometimes we agree with the government. I'm sure you're the same with your own representative bodies. But the big message was that we wanted to see improvement. We wanted to see a change for the better. And coming out of probably the worst recession this country has ever seen, and the fact that depending on who you speak to, there's between 60 and 80,000 people that worked in this industry still currently unemployed. There are challenges around getting people back to work. There are challenges about people's skills who've been out of work, who haven't been using those skills and revamping those skills. And this is where the CPD process comes in, around giving them information and upskilling them. It's a new start. And potentially for a lot of people, it's a chance to come off the dole and into a working environment where there is sustainable growth. And I think the Minister was here this morning and he's talking about the budget, and okay, it wasn't as friendly and cuddly a budget that we would have liked in the industry. We were looking for the 9% in the VAT, but there is 2.2 billion in social housing. That will create quite a lot of employment. But I stress the importance of CPD training on upskilling those people who are about to go and start building these properties, or basically retrofitting properties that need to be looked at. So again, there's a massive pool of people. This morning's first speaker talked about 3 million inside of Europe. I think when we drill down here in this country, there's quite a lot of people that will need upskilling to make sure that they can achieve the outcomes that we're looking for. As I said briefly there, after the 11th of December this year, we're going to launch the CPD plan. There will be training early new year for that. And the idea is that we will go regional with that, and that will be basically to show people how to develop their own CPD plan for the first time. By the 1st of April 2015, those plans for those registered companies will need to be back in the organisation, back into the CIRI office for vetting and for verification. And that's only the plan. On the 1st of April 2016, you will have to have your CPD points with your plan, with your evidence in for vetting at that stage of the game for renewal of your CIRI registration for that year. So they're getting roughly a year and maybe a little bit more to get themselves acquainted with the CPD process, to maintain their records, to develop their plan and develop their evidence processes. So we have a job of work around kind of delivering, along with the other training entities out there who do CPD, these 4 pillars: the building control and building regulation side of the house, health and safety training, technical and innovative training, and that kind of will cover any new innovative product coming on the market for construction. And then the final pillar of learning is the whole area of business management, something that to the greater audience in small construction companies, they struggle with. That's what they have an accountant for. They don't really grasp that nettle because they're so busy doing what they're doing. So those are the 4 pillars that CPD points can be awarded on currently under CPD. The first one, we're looking for 75% of the contact between 11th of December and the 1st of April 2016. So if people come along with a load of health and safety training and they've done nothing with the building regulations, they're going to find themselves in difficulty. They will need to have and provide evidence that they're pushing hard to learn about the building control regulations, the building regulations, the technical side of implementation. This briefing today, I was asked a question earlier on by a chap. He said to me, is this briefing, would it be suitable for CPD? And I said, yes, most definitely, because there's learning outcomes coming out of today and tomorrow as well. So from that perspective, there's a lot of positives occurring out there. We don't want the CPD process for CIRI to be arduous. We don't want it to be difficult. And that's why we said the structured CPD for those of us that have doctorates or masters or are going through a master's process or degrees or diplomas or certificates at various levels above levels 5, that's all fine. But there's an awful lot of training that can be done in-house. There's an awful lot of training that can be done through QualiBuild and other agencies out there that will deliver CPD points for people that don't have those qualifications. Breakfast briefings, day seminars are also pointable. We have structured, we have unstructured CPD points. So this is not a difficult process. What will happen is that if people don't engage properly, they'll make it difficult for themselves. And traditionally, it's like that experience that a guy explained to me last week. He said, I've got 18,001 as a standard. He said, it's a fantastic system, virtually runs itself. And then he says 6 days before the audit, and then he sees this panic because we've done nothing all year long. Now we've got to get it sorted out before the auditor arrives. That will happen initially for some people doing CPD. We'll say, look, you're due an audit, we'd like to see your evidence, and there'll be panic, and there'll be paper coming out of corners and out of drawers and everything else. But it's learning the process, it's learning the cultural change, and there is a cultural change about to occur with CPD. Because small business in construction have not been doing this. It's not something that's there. They did their Safe Pass, they did their CSCS so they could drive their machines and put their guys on site. Now we're going to be saying to them, do you know about the building regulations? Do you know about how this applies to you when you're building a property, you're building a house? Do you know about U-values and the impact they have on what you're doing? So it's a massive cultural change, and it's not going to be something that will flick a switch overnight. It's something that's going to have to be gradual. Hence, the period of time we're allowing for the CPD process to develop and get the learning process around CPD, and never mind the learning outcomes from what you're going to have to do to get your CPD in the end. So from that point of view, there's informal stuff like learning from colleagues on the job. A guy demonstrating how to put down a radon barrier, and he has 4 guys with him and he's showing them how it's to be done. That is a learning outcome. That's pointable. Reading articles or material or references to something that you're doing that is of a benefit to your business. I think the third one's a bit soft, reflecting on your own work. Well, I've had a wonderful day today and I'm feeling great, so I'm going to give myself some points, okay? Activities undertaken outside of the work. Feedback from basically people you work with or your supervision or your management. That's, I think, something that's important. So the nature of the CPD will vary and reflect the particular role of the people involved in the company and the type of company. We're not going to expect people who are small to have the same level of CPD as BAM or CISC or SIAC or one of the big players. We're expecting a relatively measured approach to the process. Okay. As I mentioned, there is a board And the good news about this board, unlike some of the boards in the country, it's unpaid. It's a voluntary board. There's some very interesting people sit on the board. We've got a lot of technical knowledge. We've got all the professional bodies involved. We've got the department involved as well. And we've got some people from the actual construction sector sitting there too. So there's a lot of knowledge around the table. And to that end, their role is really to look at registration. From a CPD point of view, they will get a report quarterly from the CPD office showing the type of training that's available, the type of companies that are engaging or seeking approval for CPD into the future. And they will have a watching brief over what the CPD office is doing. Because we want to make sure that we maintain a proper standard. It's not going to be open to everybody. We will be looking at accredited training. We'll be looking at, the standards of the training provided. We'll be dealing with complaints as and when they come, if they come, because the system has to be robust. The CIRI CPD office itself will not be providing any training. It is the registration body's CPD management unit. It doesn't do anything else but audit, inspect, verify. That's its key function. So from the transparency point of view, and one of the things I was very concerned of is because I'm the CIF training executive at the moment, was that we wanted to make sure that there was a clear line between what we do and what the CPD function will be doing. And they are totally separate and totally different. So that's an important part of the process as well. You have an image, slightly cut out because of the size of the screen, but this is the opening page of the register. It's open to everybody. It's open to one man in his van. It's open to 500 employees and a big company. The whole idea is it's about developing CPD from that side of the business. The register itself is about sending a message out there to people that are going to be consumers for whatever type of building that we plan to do. That we're serious about what we do, we're vetted, we're committed to the code of practice and the code of ethics. We're committed to changing the perception of the industry by delivering quality. And believe you me, there's quite a lot of people out there that do deliver quality. We never hear the good stories, we always hear the bad ones. It's the old story. So from that point of view, we are looking at new regulation, and that's going to continue changing. There's a desire within the sector to stamp out the non-compliant construction types of businesses, the fly-by-nights, the ones that cause problems, to expose and eliminate non-competent builders. And that's another issue within itself. But the big one for me, and the big challenge that I face into 2015, 2016, is to make sure that we provide CPD at all levels, to all levels of construction, to build that model up so that people at the end of 2016 will be saying, for the first time since I came out of apprenticeship, or since I've left school, I've actually started to learn something new about where I work and how I work, and the type of products that I deliver. Okay? As I said, the statutory register is on the way, late 2015, early 2016, depending on the government's programme of work. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much indeed.